real leaders have to show up once in a while. You don't have to go to my stuff and you don't have to go to everything anyone does. But if you're not showing up in the community, then are you really a leader?
Welcome to the Texas Embassy podcast. I'm excited about this one because of your background and your experience. But for our audience, tell us about yourself.
Wow, that's a broad question. We could be here for a while. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, in the suburbs of LA. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I'm a typical Gen Xer, right? I was the one who my parents said, don't come home until the street lights come on. I was the youngest of 4 kids with a big age gap. So my brothers were 10, 12, and 14 when I was born. My mom was 40, my dad was 52. So I had kind of like this childhood where it was like my parents were really involved. And at the same time, it was like having grandparents raise you. They were very hands-off. They'd been through 3 kids and stuff like that. And my mom got real sick when I was a teenager, and my high school years were devoted to helping my dad take care of her. And she passed away when I was a freshman in college, and my dad was 70. And he said, he was really pragmatic. He goes, well, you drew the short straw. He goes, I don't think I can live through the next college, you know. He goes, the average age span for someone my age is 72. He lived to be 99. So yeah,
that's
so we
awesome.
had a really good run. He was
something
awesome.
to look forward to there.
Yeah, well, so I look at it this way, right? He lived to be 99, but my mom died at 58. So if you split the difference, you get to 80, and that's a good run. So
that is a great run.
But I grew up in Southern California. I went to the Bay Area after college. I went to school in San Diego, and I got offered a job in Austin in 1991, before Austin was cool, before anybody knew where it was. And my girlfriend and I were like, well, should I do this? It's a long distance relationship. And the next day she went into the office and they slid a piece of paper, a fax on like fax paper to her that said, would you
some of our younger audience could go do the Google search.
You're going to have to Google what is a fax machine. Imagine getting a text on your phone with paper.
That's right.
So anyway, it was her job in the Austin facility of the company she worked for. And we were like, whoa, this is bigger than both of us. Let's do it. And she said, are you asking me to marry you? And I said, no, I'm asking you to move to Austin for 3 years. And we did. We got engaged here. We got married here.
We'll get her on the podcast and ask her her version of that.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much the version. But we raised our kids here. We've been here now 35 years.
Wow.
So it's been a long run since 1991. And I had a really eclectic career. But one of the things that happened is early on, Pike Powers and Carol Thompson both tapped me on the shoulder and said, you're starting to make a name for yourself in town. That means it's time for you to give back. And I was just stupid enough to believe both of them. So I started serving on boards. I started trying to mentor people and be involved. And it just became, part of my business was, my network, my brand, helping to promote not just the company I worked for, but other people. And it sort of led into a career as a professional speaker. And that's all I did from 2009 until the pandemic. Was I spoke at corporate events and association annual conferences, law firm partner retreats on the topic of, think about this, from 2009 forward, as the world gets more digital, why is the people side of business more important? Why does community matter? My tagline became community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. The pandemic did a number on me because I made my living standing up at live events and getting a big check at the end. And there were no live events, so there were no checks for several years. And I got approached to run the Austin Technology Council 4 years ago with the intention of reinventing it. ATC was 30 years old. The town had changed, society had changed. And so I'm now 3 years into the plan, but I've been there 4 years. But 3 years ago, I created a 5-year plan for ATC, and I'm 3 years into sort of that plan of reinventing it. And that's what leads me to sitting here with you today.
I love that. Number one, I love that you were kind of presented the option to give back.
So that used to be what happened in Austin. If you talk to people younger than me, if you talk to anybody 45 years old, 50 years old and older, somewhere along the line, you moved to town, you got involved, you started to have some success, and somebody within the ecosystem would say, you need to serve on this board, or would you mentor my nephew, or would you do this? And it was sort of this thing that if you got assimilated into Austin, you were expected that your company would sponsor the different nonprofits around town, that you would show up and buy a ticket to the major events. I mean, it was, in order to succeed in Austin 30 years ago, you had to be seen. It was very much a town because it was small.
Right.
The visibility really mattered. And there are so many people who, Bill Cunningham, Pike Powers, Glenn West, Carol Thompson, Laura Kilcrease, the list is long of people who said, now how are you going to give back? And if you go back and look at who we've put into the Austin Tech Hall of Fame in the last 3 years, these are the people who showed up. I have a saying that real leaders show up, because that's what I grew up around. It wasn't everything's going to be a private dinner at Perry's, behind closed door, or going to some rich person's house to do a bourbon tasting to talk about the future. Austin's growth took place at happy hours. It took place just in the open bar at the Four Seasons. It took place, at Chamber of Commerce events. And you had this business community.
Well, that's the magic of like South by, right?
Right.
When people talk about that forum, like what makes this great?
And South by was one of the things that, was special to Austin, that was unique. But, it's kind of this thing that if you, were making your way in Austin, you were going to find yourself involved in these things. And we were this business community, real estate, banks, law firms, bigger business. And then we were this scrappy tech startup, roll up your sleeves, go chase venture funding town. And these two things were like against each other, pushing forward. Well, that's not true anymore. And I don't think anybody else is talking about this but me. We are no longer a business community and a tech community pushing forward side by side, kind of throwing elbows. We are a business community, one business community that is heavily influenced, I might even argue to say dominated, by tech. And by tech, I mean startups, growth-oriented companies, and multinationals. And very few towns, you take the Valley out, it's a different animal, but very few places can say that their tech ecosystem has morphed into a force of their business community in the way we have in Austin. And we have to realize that that's not good or bad, but we are no longer a scrappy tech town fighting the Goliath. Tech is the Goliath.
Yeah, and I think the numbers show that, right? I mean, if you look at the number of rankings of where either the state is or even the city or the region is, it's moving up.
Well, and the other thing is you go back 30 years, if you talked tech, technology, growth, venture, if you talked about that in the state of Texas, you were talking about Austin. There was very little happening. I mean, there were things, but there was very little happening in San Antonio or even Dallas or Houston. I mean, Houston obviously had energy tech and some med tech. Dallas had, it was the home of telecommunication tech when that was a thing, when it was new. But Austin was that nucleus of it. Well, fast forward today, it's not just Austin. Dallas is one of the fastest growing tech hubs in the country. It's the leader for tech hub giant company relocations now in the country. Houston has a growing fast tech, thing around energy, but around other things as well. And San Antonio, no one's paying attention, but San Antonio has a lot of things happening. So we are no longer Austin is the king of tech. We are part of Texas. And the more that Austin should be leading, not in we're the big one, but Austin should be leading because we have the experience, the entire state forward, because things are happening in technology, and Texas is positioned to be the most populated state in the country within a decade, and for the GDP of the tech industry to be rivaling Silicon Valley in just another decade or so, which means we can't do it in the bubble of Austin. It can't be Austin versus Dallas. It can't be Austin versus Houston, and we can't be ignoring San Antonio or the Brazos Valley. Austin needs to say, we all win. If somebody relocates to Dallas, Austin wins. If a company in Houston home grows, Austin wins. And we need to take that and lead it forward throughout the state. And I don't know that we're doing that the way we should.
What should we do?
Well, first of all, I think that—
When I say we, well, the entire state or even the city.
Yeah, well, I think that Austin has to lead in a true leadership way, not a we're the big brother, we're the ones, but in a lead by example way, which means I think we need to be having more cross-pollination between the people who are building businesses in Dallas. We don't really have a statewide focus on what is the state of technology in the state of Texas. Dallas does, they look at it. Houston's doing it. San Antonio's doing it. Certainly in Austin, we look at, who are we? Where have we come from? But I think we need to be working with these cities as partners to make sure that there's a time and a place when we celebrate the growth of technology in Texas. It's not a competition thing anymore. It's now the ecosystem doesn't stop at Georgetown and San Marcos. The ecosystem stops, at Oklahoma to the Rio Grande Valley to the Gulf of Mexico, out to New Mexico. So we have to be looking at it that way, that we are a giant mega region, and Texas has to think of itself as one, not as all these different little fiefdoms.
I love that you have 35 years of being here and understanding that and seeing from when you landed here to where we are today. What excites you about the next 35 years of opportunity? I think you talked about it. We in this area, that's not the state, are going to be the biggest. But what else should we do to be pushing that progress? Well,
a lot of the press that comes out about technology comes out of New York or the Silicon Valley. And a lot of that press discredits all the other tech hubs. They specifically go after Austin as if there's nothing going on in Austin. Well, tell that to Neuralink, tell that to, all these other deep tech companies, tell that to Firefly, tell it to all these companies. Nothing's happening in Austin. There's no development happening in Austin. Well, BS, things are going to the moon, from Austin. So, there's a lot happening here. But I think that one of the things we have to really think about is as we look forward to the future, we need to realize that we're also sitting with one of the top 10, if not, 5 research universities in the United States. The University of Texas is a mega research university when it comes to tech. When we just look at AI, UT has been developing AI and studying it in the engineering school and stuff like that for 40 years. I mean, you go back and look at how long they've been working on AI out of the university. So it's not like we're just like, hey, look at what we're doing here, right? Austin has this. But if you look at other places like Pittsburgh or the Silicon Valley or Northern Virginia, the universities work deeply connected through their tech councils, through their chambers of commerce, through the businesses there. And it's not just tech transfer. We talk about, do they do a good job at tech transfer? I don't even care about that. It's, are they actively involved in the community? Because that's where inspiration comes from. Mm-hmm. If you go back 35, 40 years, it was UT and Dr. George Kosmetsky and others that inspired the entrepreneurship that was in Austin. So I think one of the things we're not doing as Austin or as Texas is embracing UT, and part of this lies on UT. They have to say, we want to be part of the community. We want to show up. Here, use our space for an event. Here, we'll sponsor this. I had someone at the university tell me, well, universities don't sponsor things like the Tech Council. Well, that's not true, and I won't name the cities, but there are cities where they're paying $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, because they're looking to grow that region. So I think that we have to re-engage the university, and then we have to look beyond UT, because St. Edward's does so much work here, especially as a university for people who are first-generation college. We need to be embracing St. Edward's.
Austin Community College.
Austin Community College it's a bellwether for what a community college can become. And I don't think our tech community pays attention to it.
They're scrappy in a great way, right? Almost like a startup. Absolutely. And they're hungry and they're getting out there. I'm seeing them do a great thing.
But are our entrepreneurs saying, ooh, let's look to what they're doing. Let's engage. Let's hire from there. Let's do that. I don't think that it's got to be a two-way street. Mm-hmm. You got Houston Tillotson. You have, all of these things that are coming up. And then as you look to the region, you get up to Baylor and you have, of course, A&M and you have all the schools in San Antonio and you get out to Houston. We have a research base in Texas that we need to harness. And again, I think that means that the universities have to be willing to step up and play as a member of the communities where they're located. And I think that the communities have to play with the universities. So I think that there's that. You also have this situation of you have big money now. We have really, really big money moving to Texas, not just Austin, moving to Houston, moving to Dallas. And
it's
I'm
the
talking
number one global headquarters location, I think, in the world.
Right, for Texas, absolutely. But you also have a lot of exited people from the Valley and New York who are setting up their families here and bringing their families here. But those people need to engage with the older school, people who've been here for 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. They can't just exist in their private rooms. Right. They have to do it. And they say, well, but the old school, they're not as welcoming. Well, those of us who've been here 35 years or 13 years, we have to be welcoming. But all these trains have to cross paths. So it goes back to what I said before. Community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. And we talk a lot about it in Austin.
Well,
But I think we need to do more of it.
I think what you're seeing is you're not only talking about, but you're doing these things, right? You've got these meetups, and I want the audience to know what you have done recently in this role. You've set up the Hall of Fame, you have these meetups, and you're doing these things consistently. Can you describe that for the audience?
Sure. So, coming into this role 4 years ago, the pandemic wasn't kind to membership organizations. And if you're a large city and you have a small organization and you just cater to members, then you're not really the thread that runs through the tech community, because if you're not paying money, you're dead to me is not a way to go. That works in a small town when we were growing. That's ATC was we're the oldest technology organization in the state, continuously running. The tech incubator is actually longer, but they have a different purpose. The Austin Technology Incubator is the longest running tech incubator, I think, in the world, out of the University of Texas. But when I came in, I took this attitude that it's all about community. So I say we're a community group first, we're a membership group second. So if your company chooses not to write a check to be a member, that doesn't mean that you're not part of our community.
Right.
If you work in tech, you're part of the Austin Tech Council, whether you like it or not, because we represent and we want to work with everybody who touches our tech ecosystem, and we're not trying to put up any barriers and any walls. So that's the first thing, is that we are here for the greater good of Austin Tech. We were founded, I love this part, to put tech on the map and to educate the community that tech could be an economic driver of the Austin area. Well, we don't have to educate anybody of that. Everybody knows that tech is driving that boat. But we were also founded to bring the community together. And that is needed more than ever, because we're starting to see silos. You have med tech people who only hang out with med tech people. You have fintech people. You have people by economic class who hang out with their own people. You have job title people who hang out. And that's great. Human beings are drawn to people who are like them.
Absolutely.
However, we also have to be a melting pot in Austin if we want to keep that secret sauce that we have. And so part of what we do is we host a monthly breakfast. We had it this morning. 50 plus people, a speaker, but there's a lot of time for chit chat and networking. And we had somebody who was a sophomore at Texas Tech who's from Austin, and he's home for the summer, and he just is an ambitious young guy. And he came, 20 years old. And we had people who lived in one woman said she'd been here 44 years and came here right after college, so even longer than me. So, and everything in between. And people from tech companies, but also people from the law firms and the banks and things like that.
Yeah, I've been to your events, I think two of them, and it is a great melting pot of folks, right? So, you do have service providers, you have people that are new to the ecosystem, that are business leaders in some capacity of these big organizations or even small organizations.
And the only way it works is if everybody realizes that real leaders have to show up once in a while. You don't have to go to my stuff, and you don't have to go to everything anyone does. But if you're not showing up in the community, then are you really a leader? If you call yourself a leader and you're just drinking bourbon with other rich people at your pool, I argue that you're a rich person who's drinking bourbon. I don't know that you're a leader. So, but it doesn't even have to be ATC. I don't ever say that my group is the group you have to go to. But I ask people all the time, what do you participate in?
Right.
And the answer from many people across the line is, what do you mean? Well, what do you participate in? So we do a monthly networking breakfast. We do about 9 or 10 of them a year because we take a couple of months off. Then we have 4 signature events. The first one is the Gateway Happy Hour that we've been doing for 20 plus years before South by. Now, It used to be the Thursday night before the Friday kickoff of South by. But when I came in, I realized that 20 years ago, nothing happened on Thursday night. Now there's like 30 events on Thursday night. So I moved it back to Tuesday for a couple of years. Last year, South by bumped up to a Wednesday start. So I moved to Monday. Next year, they're going to a Monday start. So I'm going to back it up to the Wednesday before. And people go, but the out-of-towners aren't here yet. Right. This is a party for Austin, local tech, before the world gets here. But we get, the last 4 years, 350 people. We do it on a bar on 6th Street. So it's inexpensive. There's no VIP areas. There's no thing. It's everybody. You come and you network and you have a beer or a beverage of your choice. It doesn't have to be a beer. So there's that event. Then we do a thing that we started last year. The second one will be on August 20th called the State of Tech Luncheon, where we talk about where did Austin come from? Where is it? We have a local CEO with a long track record as the keynote. Last year it was Tyson Tuttle. This year it is Heather Bruner. Talking about, and Heather's a great person because she's been the CEO at WP Engine for, a decade, but she helped grow Bazaar Voice, and she's an alumni of Trilogy. So she has seen this whole ecosystem every way. So she's going to talk, and she's a woman in tech, talk about, what she's seen in her, decades here and where she thinks we're going. And then we're going to have a panel where we look at some deep tech stuff that's going on here as well. So that's that event. The signature event is the Austin Tech Hall of Fame. And we started that 3 years ago. It came to me on a run before my arthritis kicked in. I couldn't run anymore. And it turns out once I got it going, someone said, ATC did this in like 2013. So I did some homework and they did it very differently. And they did it for a couple of years and put a couple of people into it one at a time. So I honored those people. I found out who they were and they are part of the Tech Hall of Fame. It was called the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, but they did it. It wasn't its own event. It was just they honored somebody.
Sure.
And so I had already got the ball rolling. And the way I decided to do it is you can't honor one person a year. You never catch up. But you also can't drop 70 people into a Hall of Fame in one night or it's going to be the most boring long night ever.
There's the reality of that, yes.
So I said, we're going to do an 8-year launch. And nobody understood the first year what I was talking about. And I said, we're doing an 8-year launch. 8 legacy inductees a year. However, we're also going to have a 24, then a 25, then this year a 26 inductee. Somebody who's currently doing amazing things.
Got it.
And then we started a first-time founder award where we honor someone who's never started a tech company before and they're about 3 to 7 years in and they're kicking butt. So by designing it that way, we celebrate the past, we're present in the now, and we look to the future. So we've done a cocktail party every year, the 8 people, one that we surprise who is the 2026 and the first-time founder. We announce who the 8 legacy people are each year. So plus the couple that came along before we started it. So we now have 30 plus people that have been put into the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And you can go to austintechhalloffame.com. It lives on there. My hope is when they open the convention center, I can get them to give me a wall with a TV screen.
Oh, that'd be
and we
cool.
can have the Austin Tech Hall of Fame spinning, but I haven't been able to get their ear yet about that. But I think it should live somewhere or in City Hall or something.
Well, normally I ask you like who should follow you on the podcast. I think that's right now, maybe a thread is all your inductees.
Yeah.
Is to get them on here to really talk about that from their perspective.
Absolutely.
Why they were considered and why they were, awarded. In that
absolutely.
way.
And it's people who are, age-wise younger. I mean, I think the youngest would probably have been in his late 40s. To the first year we put Bobby Inman in, he was like 93 then. And so he's older now, 92 then. So, but it's people, some people had passed away and we put them in after they'd passed away. So it was something that I'm very proud of. In fact, I say that is my legacy in this job. If I leave tomorrow, if the board decides to put somebody else in or I walk away, my legacy will be that I founded this. Nobody's going to put me in the Austin Tech Hall of Fame, but it's
not yet. Not
yet. Wait, let me hold my breath. I don't expect ever, and that's okay. It's not about that. It's about the fact that if we don't know where we came from and we don't honor the people, and the way this came up is another tech council in another city. When I took this job, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep the job. I tried to quit, and right after I took it, and the COO of another tech council took me under his wing and gave me some advice. But one of the things he said is and I'd gone up to visit him, he said, go back to Austin and ask everyone you meet, ask 100 people under the age of 45 this question. And I'm like ready to take notes and I'm looking at him and he goes, ask everybody, who is Dr. George Kosmetsky? And I looked at him and I go, well, I know who that is. I met him before he passed away several times. How do you know who he is? This is somebody 1,000 miles away. And he said, we've been studying the Austin growth of your ecosystem. If you take him out, Austin never happens because of what he did, right? He didn't just take the business school forward into its new direction to become a top tier business school. He worked with the city government, the state government. He worked with the tech community, and he was famous for telling entrepreneurs and other business people in Austin, if we don't build a stronger economy, where will your grandchildren work? Don't you want your grandchildren to stay here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, he sparked this idea that we had to give back to Austin. And his biography is called A Civic-Minded Entrepreneur. And they said of him that if you were putting on an event, something like we do at ATC or like you do here at Q Branch or whatever, if you were putting on an event and that event mattered, so like the Hall of Fame or something like that, if you wanted him there because it was important that he was seen and that he was present, if he was in town and he was available, he would come. Because that's where I kind of got the real leaders show up thing, is that weren't the exact words he used, but he basically was willing to do that. So anyway, this person in another city told me that. I came back, I interviewed 100 people, 2 knew the answer. And one of them just said something to do with UT, and I gave him credit. So we don't know our past. all of a sudden you have a problem. So I believe you have to celebrate that past, but you can't live in the past and you don't want to go backwards. So you got to be present in the now. So that's why we put someone in to the Hall of Fame every year who's doing something. You know, they have to have a track record. My rule, unofficial rule, you have to have lived in Austin a decade before you're Hall of Fame worthy. And I tell the committee every year, look, it's not a popularity contest. If you don't like the person as an individual, it doesn't matter. Did they and the work they did influence the growth of our technology community? And are they, air quotes, Hall of Fame worthy? And they're like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, you know what it means. Are they Hall of Fame worthy? If somebody says, why did you put them in the Hall of Fame? Could you answer they're worthy because of this?
Sure.
And I also don't let my committee talk to each other. They don't have a big meeting because then you get
consensus
into
or
well, because what happens is you start bartering. Well, I'll vote for Mary if you vote for Bobby, and you know all this stuff. And if somebody doesn't like somebody, they go, well, let me do this. So they just get the list of everybody who was nominated, and nominations are open to the community. They get the list of nominations, and then they pick 7 or something like that. And then we just hashtag it. And that's how we figure out who gets in. And people go, well, but that doesn't take into effect this and that. Right. It's a Hall of Fame. Are they Hall of Fame worthy? So that's the third big event. And then the fourth event is something new I'm working on. Don't have an official name for it. I'm calling it kind of a working title, Evolve and Reset, but I don't know if that's going to stick. It's an innovation summit of TED-style type talks where we'll have like a professor from the engineering school, maybe a student from the engineering school who's like developed something amazing. And then 3 or 4 like deep tech innovators here in Austin who will do short talks with a little bit of Q&A.
We don't do that? There's never been a TED Talk here in Austin?
Well, there's been TED.
Got it. Okay.
This is TED style.
Got it.
But there's not been anything focused 100% on tech and really, again, taking into effect who's doing really interesting stuff.
Right.
So it's, and no politics in who I'm picking. It's not, we have to have this, we have to have that. It's really who can we get that
would be super compelling.
So I'm working with partnering with somebody to make this happen, and I'm looking to do it in September, but we have to get going because I need sponsors to do it.
Right.
I won't pull the trigger on an event until it's funded. And so I need to get sponsors for it. But those would be our 4 signature events then.
Wow. When do you rest?
Well, right now, there's no one else on staff at ATC but me. So, fortunately, I'm a good events guy. I mean, being a professional speaker, I've spoken at over 1,000 events. So I know what makes a good event. So, people are like, oh, you should hire an events company. It's like, why? I totally know how to do that.
Right.
So.
How can people help you, man? I mean, you're an amazing human already.
No, I'm not.
How can people really, grab an oar and help you row?
We need to have more community support. They say that, and I read a survey, I don't remember the exact number, but it's like 40 or 50%. Corporate citizenship, meaning banks, law firms, tech companies, everybody who support their Chamber of Commerce, support the Tech Council, sponsor things, is down like 40 to 50% over the last 20 years. So the finances behind doing these types of events and finances behind being able to have a staff to help are the most important thing. And that's the biggest struggle I have is, when I came in, there was some debt that had to be paid off from the pandemic. And I just, we've gotten that all taken care of. We have no debt. But we need to have more financial backing. We need more people to say, hey, you're doing a good job. We're willing to step up and sponsor. I call every company that writes us a check, not just as membership, but as a sponsor, I call them community champions. Okay. And not just us. I call anyone who sponsors any nonprofit in town a community champion. Because whether it's the Chamber, whether it's Austin Women in Technology, any of these groups, we can't do what we do if someone isn't saying, we'll help fund it.
Right.
And, money doesn't fall from trees. The city doesn't fund me. The state doesn't fund me. It's entirely funded by tech companies and the service providers who serve them.
Grassroots, right? Shoestring.
Right. So when you say, what can we do to help? Get some people with money to write checks to ATC. Because then we could have the Pittsburgh Technology Council has a $6 million budget or something like that, and 17 people on staff. The Phoenix, Arizona, it's statewide Arizona Tech Council, 18 people on staff. Northern Virginia, 10 people on staff. We have me. And I think that Austin shouldn't have one of the smallest tech councils. We should have one of the biggest.
Thom, I want to take a departure from what you're working on right now and really dive deeper into you and what made you even want to speak professionally. Because I think that that's one of the things that makes you a superpower in vocalizing this in a very authentic way, right? To where people can gravitate towards that. It's your ability to storytell. Funny enough, was a public speaking champion in Alabama, of all places.
Hey, they know how to tell stories in the South, man. That's good.
Do. But that's a superpower. But it takes some time and training. And I know you're certified in this as well. But number one, what made you want to start speaking publicly in that way?
So a couple things. I was in sales and marketing. And if you're in sales and marketing, you go to a lot of conferences, either sales and marketing conference where you're there to learn, or your company has a booth. And so you're at the conference because you're working the trade show or whatever. And then plus just being super involved in Austin, I went to a lot of things. And I can remember sitting in the conference room chairs watching the speaker and literally thinking she or he, they have a better job than I do. How do you get to do that? And at first I thought, oh, we have to be famous. You have to be a best-selling author. You have to be this. And then I started realizing that a lot of these people were just people who had some experience, who could tell a really good story. And I started befriending them and asking, how do you get into doing this? And some of them were extremely successful and gave me the time and told me how to do it. There was a gentleman who was the #1 professional speaker probably of the 90s, a guy by the name of Harvey Mackay. He's in his 90s. He's still alive. He's most famous for a book called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. However, he wrote 10 books, 8 of which were, I don't know if it was 10 or 12 or however many, but all but like 1 or 2 of his books were New York Times bestsellers. So super famous. Now, this is before the internet. He was going to be speaking at an event in Austin. And I wrote him a letter and said, I think I want to be a speaker. After the event, could I talk to you? And he wrote me a letter back. So I was planning like 6 weeks out. And he said, if you come to the event, you wait. He goes, I'm going to talk to everyone who comes to talk to me. If you'll wait till that's done, we can go to the coffee shop at the Hyatt and get a cup of coffee and we can talk. And there were 300 people at this event and 290 wanted to talk to Harvey Mackay. And I just sat like third row, just waited. People were getting their books signed. They were doing all this stuff. When it was done, he looks over.
How old were you then?
Late 20s.
Late 20s.
It was, it was probably before Jackie was born and Jackie's 29. So, so 30 years ago. So anyway, when he finished The Last Person, he packed up his, I don't even think he had a computer 30 years. I think it was like overhead slides, right? Like clear things for an overhead projector.
That's right.
Put them all in a little folder, put them in his briefcase. And he turns and goes, you must be Thom Singer. And I said, yeah. And he goes, let's go get some coffee. And he gave me an hour and a half and talked to me. Then a few years later, organization I was involved with brought him to town. And I said, well, I'll drive you anywhere you want to go while you're in Austin. So I had him in my car all day. And all we talked about was the speaking business. So there was that piece of it. Going back farther, when I was a kid, I desperately wanted to be an actor or a stand-up comic, or a sitcom actor. One of my friends jokes that if I had done it, I might have had the role of Chandler on Friends, because that would have been like the ideal role.
Yeah, I could see you.
Would have been the ideal role for me.
I could see that in that role.
Could I be any more Chandler? But I wanted to do. I was involved in high school plays, community theater. I did all this stuff. I won awards, but I was too insecure to try, to go and try. And here's the biggest thing. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up 20 minutes from Hollywood and Vine.
I know.
And I never,
part of it.
I never pursued it. And my parents, God love them, they were great parents. They didn't think it was a good idea to not go to college and try to be an actor. So they steered me away from it and said, look, after college, you can go do it. Well, the problem is after college, you have a girlfriend, you get married, you move across the country. It's not like we could just pack up with a baby and say, okay, I'm going to go follow this dream that, you have a 0.01% chance of doing anything with.
Well, Thom, spoiler alert, Austin and Texas is becoming the film mecca.
If somebody listening wants to put me into a show, if somebody wants to give me just one line in a coffee shop, I'll play a barista.
That's right.
But so anyway, I always wanted to do it. And what I found once I started speaking professionally, it gave me that time on stage. It wasn't the same, but it gave me kind of what I wanted on that. And so often you talk to speakers and they're like, oh, I don't have an ego. I just want to serve people. BS. You do not choose a business where you stand up in front of an audience if you don't have a little bit of an ego. It doesn't mean it has to be your driving force,
right?
But you have to get some joy from being that person on stage. Otherwise, it's too hard of a game. So I had that thing that I wanted to do it. And then through learning and studying it and doing trial and error, I was pretty good at it. And so people would see me speak and they'd hire me to come into their company. And in 2009, the recession, I got laid off. I was marketing director for a company, and they let a lot of people go. So the company survived, and the owner, the CEO, smart CEO, made the right choice. Wasn't the best day for people who got laid off, but the company survived and grew and bigger than it ever was. That being said, I said, I'm going to follow my dream. And my wife said, okay, I support you. I'll give you 2 years to see if you can make money.
Love that.
And 2 years later, I was making what I made in corporate America. And I never got rich. I never got famous, but I had a lifestyle business for 12 years that allowed me to cash flow sending my kids to college, and some other stuff. And so, I was good at it, and I had a topic that mattered. It matters more today as we go into this AI world. The human side of business matters more than ever.
Absolutely.
But I've been talking about it for 20 plus years.
Yeah, I still say, me being around technology, as I grew up in the military, now afterwards, the underlying common denominator is humans, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what it is, this is still a human business.
Yeah. Well, and I call it, the last decade especially, but really 30 years, we have focused on technology and productivity. And that's important, and it's good, and it's helped people and companies grow and make money. It's made society better, but it's also created a whole class of what I call efficient strangers. And that is, we can get the work done. You can work with somebody right here at your company. You can have a project. You can boom, 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 get it out. But you don't know if their kid plays soccer. You don't know where they grew up. You don't even know where they went to college in some cases. And these are people who are on your team. When you start getting to vendors, and you start getting to clients and prospects, there's even less connection. So we have an entire group where you used to work on a project and share experience. Shared experiences are how we build relationships. We used to build relationships through working with people. Number one place people met spouses and best friends and stuff was work. Now, people are efficient strangers. And the antidote to that is, how do you become a deliberate human? And that's what we have to work on now.
And Thom, that's why I opened up my podcast with tell us about yourself, so that people can find some level of human connection to you through your words, through your background, to either listen even more intently or potentially even follow up with you after the fact, right? I think because this is a human business, and, the fact that you are a public speaker, I think that is going to distinguish another ability for people to tell their story. I mean, look, we're in tech. I mean, pitching is part of it, and being able to tell a good story finds more level of traction than somebody just talking about an item that they don't believe convictionally in.
If you go back in history, thousands of years, ancient man did not sit around the fire and educate the next generation by passing out a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint or a pie chart. They educated the next generation through telling stories and metaphors, because our brains, because of this, our brains are wired to remember stories. So DNA. You can be the smartest person out there. You can be the best, leader in your industry. But if you get up and just data dump when it's your turn at a microphone, people might say, wow, we were so lucky to be around him. He is so smart. But 3 weeks later, they don't remember a damn thing you said. But if you can take your points and weave them together with a story, then all of a sudden people relate to the story. They can see themselves in the story. Months later, they may not even remember your name, but they'll be like, remember the person. I get booked to keynote conferences by people who saw me a decade ago, who call the association and go, who was the guy whose daughter had the head surgery? And they'll be like, oh, I remember him. Yeah. And then they'll call and they'll be like, I just remember that story about your daughter. And 10 years later, I get booked because they remembered the story that made the point.
Do you want to tell that story?
Well, so my topic is your network and your brand and trust, right? So that's what I talk about. And I can talk about it for an hour, and I can tell you in a keynote why this will help your business and your career. And then the last 10 minutes, a slide comes up on my PowerPoint that just says, this isn't just about business. And I say, look, anytime you're dealing with another person, another carbon-based life form, the person sitting across the table from you has their own stuff going on. And then I ask the audience, do you know what stuff is? Sometimes it's good stuff. They get promoted, they get married, they have a child, they have a grandchild, something good. When someone has something good happening in their life and you know them, celebrate it with them. Take them to lunch, send them an email. Give them a bottle of wine. Congratulations on your promotion. When you share the good stuff, you bond with people, because humans build relationships through shared experiences. You don't even have to be part of the experience. If you celebrate it with them, you get that connection. But the hard part is sometimes bad things happen to really good people. Mm-hmm. And when those bad things happen, we don't know what to say to them. So do you know what we say? We say nothing. We see them at a networking event. We see them at Q Branch. We see them at the Austin Technology Council. We see them at the Chamber of Commerce. And we either look at our shoes and run to the bar to get away from them, or we don't know what to say. So we just talk about UT football or how hot it is in Austin.
Right.
The flip side is that's when people need you the most. When someone's going through a rough time, that's when they need it. And I know this firsthand because when my youngest daughter was born, she was born with a medical condition where the bones in her skull had fused together and it wasn't diagnosed properly. Should have been diagnosed in a sonogram, should have been diagnosed at birth, and it wasn't. So as she grew, her head wasn't shaping right. And we kept asking the doctor about it. And he kept saying, heads are funny. Everybody has a different head. One time he said, go to the mall. I mean, this was 25 years ago when people used to go to the mall. He goes, go to the mall, look around. Everybody's got a different shaped head. And I joke with the audience. I'm like, don't do it now. There's some noggins in this room, right? So they laugh. And then I say, but here's the thing. We finally convinced the doctor to do a CAT scan, and it came back for this thing called sagittal synostosis. Kate's head had fused together from soft spot to soft spot, and it would never grow sideways. She was going to have an elephant man-like deformity because her head had to double in size just about from being an infant, 4 months old. And the doctor told us we had two choices. We raise a kid with a socially limiting handicap, or we do surgery before she's 6 months old. We were diagnosed just shy of 5 months old, where they'll remove the entire top of her skull and then close the skin back up over the brain. And he said, if we do it before 6 months old, the bones should grow back. And I asked the audience, I go, what part of that's not reassuring? And it gets a laugh, it should grow back, probably. And we had to find a doctor. And what happened was my wife would get on a plane with Kate and fly to these different cities. We didn't have Dell Children's Hospital 24 years ago. And I would still have to go to work. And I would go to these events around town and I would see it. People would look at me and they'd walk away. Friends of mine couldn't look me in the eye. People I barely knew avoided me like the plague. But there were other people who did the opposite. They came up, they gave me a hug. They talked to me about, they knew what was going on. I was in a group and these women were saying that their church group, all different denominations, were praying for Kate every morning in their prayer circles around all over town and beyond. And one guy who heard that pulled me aside and he goes, Thom, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a higher power. He goes, but I want you to know I care too. And he gave me a hug. Wow. And I will never forget that. And then he told me, he goes, I live in your neighborhood. And he goes, I run by your house every morning and I send good vibes towards that baby. And I would laugh. And in the mornings, I'd look out the blinds expecting to see some guy flicking vibes towards the house as he ran by. And
that's amazing.
And I tell that story not because the audience is ever going to need a pediatric neurosurgeon. I tell that story because they're going to need something. And what happened was at 1 o'clock in the morning during this whole thing, the phone rang. And it was somebody in my network and their first cousin happened to be the best doctor in the world for this. He had pioneered a new way to do the surgery, that instead of opening up the whole skull, they'd take the bone out in little pieces. And he goes, he called me and says, he identified himself. And I'm like, why are you calling me at 1:30? We weren't that level of friends. And he told me who his cousin was and you couldn't get in to see him. And he said, well, he's expecting your call tomorrow.
That's amazing.
And the next day I called Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. I asked for Dr. Meltzer. They patched me through. He said, I want to see Kate. My wife flew Kate to San Diego 2 days later. She called me and goes, get out here. He's the first doctor with any urgency. My older daughter was 5. We got on a plane. We flew to San Diego. And on Friday morning, we handed Kate over to the doctors. And 4 hours later, they called my cell phone and said, Kate is going to be fabulous. And at this point, when I tell the story, the PowerPoint hits and pictures of Kate at 24 years old. She's a graduate of Dartmouth. She is beautiful. She is a land sustainability expert, which means she does controlled burns. Kate's a badass. And pictures of all this start hitting the screen behind me. And I tell the audience, I say, look, I don't know what you're going to need, but in your life, you're going to need something. So at the next break, do you want to look at your phone and check voicemail? Or do you want to talk to somebody in this room?
Thom, that story hit me firsthand because one, parents having to go through that with their child is my son went through that. He had an aneurysmal bone cyst, and you don't believe, you know that there's something wrong. There's that continuance. And today, my son, similar story, but it's that conviction of a parent. And you're right, it does take others. And you don't know the power of people sometimes. So thank you for sharing that. I didn't mean for that to really open up, but I'm very appreciative of you sharing that.
Well, and what I say is Kate was 6 months old when she had her surgery. She'll never remember. She knows the story. She's seen me speak.
Right.
She knows I tell it all over the world. But she'll never remember what she went through. But her mother and I will never forget. Right. And we'll never forget that it was through the connection of someone we knew.
Absolutely.
That led us to the best doctor in the world.
Similar story. And I love that. I thank you for sharing that. Well, Thom, I know you're on a mission, and that's been clearly articulated here. And one of the things that we do in the podcast, just like Maverick or Goose, we either assign you a call sign or we allow you to pick your own. So if you were to be given a call sign right now because of the mission that you're on today, what would that call sign be?
I'm not military, but if you're in the military, you don't get to pick your own call sign, right?
I know you don't. That's why I'm giving you that answer.
Other people give it to you. And that's both good and bad, because part of it is you don't want a lame call sign. I'm sure there's people who get them and they're like, forever I have to be known as Toenail, or whatever. Oh, God.
Snoopy?
Right. It's like, So first of all, I can't think of anything cool, but I love the word raconteur, which is really storyteller.
I love that. Or the storyteller. Yeah, I love that. Okay, another thing that we ask is, what are some books that have either inspired you or that you're reading right now that you would want others to be a part of that?
So right now I'm reading Brett Hurt's new book that he just released last Tuesday. I had the honor of being invited to the book launch party last week, where he was interviewed about the book in a live podcast there. It's called Love Conquers Fear. And Brett is a very big believer that the changes that are coming because of AI are going to be huge. But he's also 95% sure that they're for the good, and that 5% we destroy ourselves. And I'm like, I don't know that I like the 5%, but
yeah, that's a big number.
But Brett is on a mission, and he calls it Love Conquers Fear. And I've known Brett for 20 plus years. He's a different person now. He's been on a quest for a year and a half. And so to see him speak, I'm going to have him on the Austin Technology Council podcast in a couple weeks. I got a copy of the book because everybody who came to the book launch got one, but I bought it on audio. So I have, every time I jump in the car, all I hear is Brett Hurt talking about, the changes in the world that are coming, spirituality, the connection to a higher power. And I think it's fascinating that this is not coming from someone who was like a guru, guy,
right.
Doing all this stuff. He was a programmer who took companies public and did all this stuff. I think it's more authentic coming from someone who was a corporate tech titan who now says, oh, look at how much more we're connected as a world. And so I'm finding his book fascinating, and I'm sort of drawn to it.
That's amazing. And I think, I didn't mean to be presumptuous of bringing in the Hall of Famers, but I would love to do that. But who else do you think should be coming on the podcast?
So I think for this show, I think it would be really interesting to go out and find the people who are running the other business nonprofits in Austin, because you look at Austin Women in Technology, you look at the Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, you look at the African American Chamber of Commerce, you look at Jeremy, who runs the Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce. There is still a place for business nonprofits. There's a gentleman here in town, he's a good friend of mine, he might listen to this, he knows you know who you are, and I won't call you out, who says that the world has changed. There's no need for a chamber of commerce. There's no need for tech councils. There's no need for these business groups. He goes, things are getting done in private rooms. He believes in private curated things. And I believe there's a time and a place for a private curated dinner at Perry's. I get invited to them sometimes, and I always say yes, and I like to go. However, that's an ivory tower if that's the only way things are happening. So I think that there is still a need, because if the average person, we can't just cater to the people who've had exits and have a lot of money.
Correct, man.
If the average person doesn't feel they can pull their chair up to the table, and there's a lot of women and people of color who tell me, I don't know where to pull my chair up. There's no place at the table. Well, yes, there is. There's a place at my table. And in Austin, there's not one table. This is the thing I think we need to realize, is that there's not one place that you need to be. There's 20 tables. And if you can't find a place, start your own table.
Right.
But I still think there is a time and a place for strong business organizations. I think Rotary clubs still serve a purpose. I think Young Men's Business League and Young Women's Alliance, local groups here in Austin, if you talk to people my age who came up in the business community, many, not all, many were members of the Young Men's Business League. And that's when they first got to town, how they made their first friends. People that, if they were sports, they played basketball and softball and stuff like that. If they were into philanthropy, they raised money to help send kids to camp. So groups like Young Men's Business League, groups like Young Women's Alliance, Austin Women in Technology, the Austin Technology Council, the Chambers of Commerce in the area. I think these groups are more important today. So I would say find either the staff or the current, elected chairs of these groups and have more and more of them on talking about where their table is and how they can interact with
I think that's huge, right? Number one, and we can't look at just people that have been here for 35 years.
Right.
And what we're seeing now is the world is more mobile right now. And you're seeing this migration, but that migration has always happened. I mean, look, I come from the military. Name a state
Move around all the time.
move around all the time. And just like when you land somewhere, you want to feel part of that community. And where do I go? Right. And so businesses are usually part of that. And so they only know really the professional aspect of connecting to these business organizations. And I'm sure they want to be protective of their ecosystem. But I think that's part of the higher degree of what the gentleman who, again, is not named here, but why he would say those organizations need to change or evolve in that way.
Absolutely.
And I think that evolution is critical to the human aspects of it. Okay, we want you to be a part of this ecosystem or meet the community, but don't sell us right away, right? I mean, just first integrate into it. Let us know and find the warmth of the connection or the opportunity.
And there tends to be, and I see this, some of the old timers get snarky about some of the newcomers. And some of the newcomers are dismissive of some of the old timers. And each side says, well, it's them. Well, no, both sides have to. The newer players have to come in and say, why do the old timers say, well, this is the way it used to be? Right. It's not the way it used to be was wrong, but we can't go back. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the old timers have to be like, well, the newcomers have fresh ideas and all this. So I think that that's where these business groups serve a purpose, but it means everybody has to be willing, to come in, show up once in a while. You don't have to belong to everything. You can't belong to more than a couple of groups.
Right.
But I think that, having a place when you come to a town where you can find friends and get integrated is what makes you put down roots in that town. And I think that if you leave everything to who's going to have a little private party, then you're leaving a ton of people behind. And it's this particular person, he's awesome. He has a huge heart, but he very much believes in, these people who've made a lot of money and have moved here and all this stuff. And it's like, that's just one piece. That can't be, they can't be driving the boat. Just like the people who've been here 40 years can't be driving the boat. There has to be lots of boats, and we have to be driving them in roughly the same way. We don't even have to drive them the same way. If you go back and look at the people who really made the 60 people in my head who I think made Austin, here's the thing. I knew a lot of them. I didn't know all of them. Some of them had egos. I know that is shocking in tech that people had egos, but yes, some of them had egos. Some of them had personal agendas for why they were doing things in town. Oh my God, somebody in tech who's making a lot of money who has a personal agenda. Shocking, I know. And some of them did not like each other.
That's even more shocking.
Shocking. However, they all were driving towards the same thing. Not exactly the same thing, but it's like, if your river is wide and you're all going upstream, it doesn't matter if you're on the right side or the left side. Everybody's moving that way. It's great. And nobody's mining the river to blow the other people up.
Right. It's been amazing. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Again, we'll put all of the taglines in the narrative of where we post this so that people can continue to reach out and be supportive of what you're doing, because you're doing amazing things.